Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel. You've met me, I'm Jeffrey Steiner, and I'm going to be your host for this Q&A. To my left, we have our engineer, Aaron Wolf, who you may remember from last time. Aaron, do you want to say a little bit about yourself for the people that maybe haven't tuned into the last one, aren't familiar with you yet?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I'm Aaron, and I've been working with Bill for over 20 years, working on designing the electronics. I do the hardware design for our electronic circuit boards, as well as doing some programming. And so yeah, it's been great.
Awesome, thank you. Next, to Aaron's left, we've got Bill Chandler. You saw him earlier in this segment and probably on the last one as well. He is the man behind these systems. Bill, do you have anything to say to the people watching right now?
Well, I was the first Chandler Systems employee.
That's true.
Around 1990. And I didn't have to go through any excruciating review or interview, so I was hired on the spot, and I have been here ever since.
Oh, we're glad you're still here, or else we wouldn't be. Next to Bill, you've also seen him earlier in the segment. Mike Mcnall hasn't been here quite as long as Bill, but almost. Mike, how long have you been doing this?
Well, actually, I'm kind of the senior member of this. When I was a senior in high school, I went to school in the morning and the afternoon worked in the drafting department at F.E. Myers. At that point, in 1972, Myers was manufacturing pumps and sprayers and sewer cleaners and water treatment equipment. Well, then fast forward 8 years later, Bill Chandler and his brother Jim purchased the water softening line from Myers and started WaterSoft. And I worked with Bill back in the WaterSoft days, and then got lured back to Chandler Systems Incorporated in 2009, and I've been running commercial equipment ever since then.
Awesome. Well, that's a cool little tidbit there. Everyone here watching, I'm sure, is familiar with Myers Pumps, and they have been a big part of the history of Ashland, Ohio, and so it's cool. Now we are a big part of that. So we're happy to be here in Ashland, just up the street from where Myers used to be manufactured. Well, without further ado, going to get started with these questions. I'm going to begin with one for Aaron. Someone asks, what happens if the Wi-Fi goes down or if they have a weak Wi-Fi signal?
Yeah, first of all, we design drop so that you don't need a Wi-Fi connection to actually run your drop system. You could actually run your drop system completely without having a Wi-Fi connection at all. The Wi-Fi connection brings remote connectivity, and it also brings notifications being able to be sent out to users. And so that's all you really need the Wi-Fi for. So if a Wi-Fi signal goes away, drop will continue to do its job. It'll continue to run your softeners, meter your water, watch for leaks, all that stuff without the Wi-Fi connection. And if it goes away for a while, comes back, there won't be any problem. If someone has a weak Wi-Fi signal, there again, it'd be best to try to remedy that just for the remote connectivity and the notification reasons, but it will not affect the operation of your drop system.
Good to know. All right, let me see, starting to get a few more in here. The next question is, how do you decide if you're better off to use 3 larger tanks or, say, 6 smaller tanks for a system? Bill, you introduced us to the Proplex technology and the benefits of that. Do you want to take that question? When would I choose more smaller tanks as opposed to larger tanks?
Sure. Yeah, the main thing about using multiple tanks is that if you have a broad range of flow, you get much better resolution in a water softener. So you would choose, in an application where the flow range was wide, then you would want to choose as many as you could practically use so that you had that resolution per unit and picked up the efficiency of that. On a filter, it's really more about how much backwash water you have available. So you use multiplex filtration based on how you can properly backwash the filter. So a lot of times you choose multiple tanks in filtration so that you can backwash it, and you got to understand it takes a lot of water to backwash, so it might end up being a triplex because you have no available water in a duplex and so on. So that's basically what on a filter, it's basically how much water can you backwash it with, and on a softener, it's just more resolution for broad range.
Okay.
I've got a great real-world example of that, of a very large home in a popular ski resort, 17-bathroom mansion. Normally, during the year, there was just one person, the caretaker, who took care of this property. However, when the ski weekend rolled around, the owner and his children and their friends and family and cousins, they all show up at this mansion, so we could have 30 people needing water. So that's a great place for a Proplex to be used.
Yeah, absolutely. We got another question that kind of piggybacks onto that. Someone asked, how is Proplex, how and why is it more efficient than a traditional interlocked system where you got all the tanks online at all times? And this may have already been addressed somewhat, but you want to go, Bill, do you want to go into a little more depth about why that's greater efficiency?
Yeah, as you break it down for a higher resolution and you're plexing the units, you also have the ability, normally when there's 2 units or 1 unit, you have to hold a large reserve capacity. In plexing, we had the ability to, as that simulation earlier showed, we have the ability to completely exhaust the resin and then switch to another tank before we regenerate it. So the amount of energy that you've already put in treating water, you lose in your reserve if no one uses it. So it's always a guess of how much reserve to use. This makes your resolution pretty accurate, and it also does not have you flushing down the drain waters you've already treated.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Everyone's familiar with duplex softeners, have been around for ages, and most of us are familiar with the benefits of that. It's just like that on a larger scale and more robust with being able to have multiple tanks taken on and off. Question for Aaron here. Someone wants to know what is involved in programming the valve if you have a single tank versus multiple tanks. What additional programming is necessary for that?
Sure. Actually, there is no programming involved in that. The drop system has been smartly designed to know there's one tank attached, one softener attached, or whether there's 3 softeners attached, and when they're multiplexed, and you attach 3 softeners, the hub just automatically knows to treat them as a progressive system. And it even knows you can attach a single filter and say 2 softeners, and it will know to multiplex those 2 softeners, and that single filter will treat as a single standalone unit. And there's really no programming at all that the end user has to do.
Awesome.
It also then, just to follow up on that, when there's filters and softeners together, it actually makes sure that they don't coincide in their regeneration together. So it offsets the filtration to a different time slot. Whereas now, you have to go and manually program that.
Yeah.
The drop system does that inherently.
Yeah, one of the most beautiful things about drop, whether it's the commercial system or the residential systems, is there's no more setting the time of day on each individual unit, staggering the regen time. You used to have to do that individually on each separate valve, and drop is one seamlessly integrated system that it knows what time it is, and it knows what's hooked up to it, and it makes sure that they're backwashing when they need to. Aaron, another quick valve question. Someone wants to know if the softener valves can do an upflow regeneration.
No, they cannot. That's just a short answer. They are downflow only. But at the same time, we feel like we can, with the Proplex system, really still hit good efficiencies still with the downflow.
Absolutely, and I believe we've done some research in our lab with that too, and we could do upflow brining if we want to. We haven't really seen a big difference in efficiency with that, right?
Yeah. Our residential valve is possible to do the upflow brining, but on the commercial, yeah, it's just a downflow, and there is not a huge difference until you really get really picky on the efficiencies and really trying to hit the high end that the upflow really starts helping.
I think you're right though, that with the benefits of Proplex would give you a greater efficiency than simply a different type of brine.
There's also some inherent risks in the upflow. If someone gets air, something like that, you get a small air bubble in there, And similarly to channeling, this air bubble drills a hole, and then your brine follows that. So there's a lot more expertise needed in the field and control, which makes the unit cost more and so on. So we've really found that we can really optimize efficiency through the measures we're using right now.
Good answer. Next question. Bill said the web-based version of the Drop app will allow us to monitor multiple systems at the same time. What is the max number of systems that I would be able to monitor at one time, and is there an exact release date when it will be available? This is for Bill or Aaron, whoever wants to jump in on this.
That exact date, I think I'll let you do that.
Yeah, exact date. There's not an exact date. Certainly the date it'll be released is when it's done and working well. We test everything well in-house and try to put as few bugs out in the field as possible. And so it is actively being worked on right now. We have one of our engineers working on it every day and getting that so it'll be brought to you as soon as possible. As far as the number of systems, as far as I know, there's no limit to the number of systems that you'll be able to check. You'll be able to search for systems. There will be some custom fields, so if you want to put in somebody's name or address or a customer number in there and search by that, all that will be available and possible. And so really we're gearing it up to be a large-scale access system for you to be able to access these units and systems remotely and see what's going on without getting out on the job site.
Very cool.
The other thing that will do is you can set the parameters so your system in the field can push notifications to you, and then they would all just show up. Basically, the ones that you wanted to see on your screen in the morning would be available for service or salt or whatever. And we're constantly adding more and more parameters that we're monitoring that would then fall into that and be pushed out to a central nervous system for deploying service people, and they would have a much better idea during the day what's going on.
All right. I'm sure everyone's anxious for that to come out, but it's going to be really cool when it does. I would challenge anyone out there, if you're concerned about how many systems can it monitor, I would suspect it probably is no limit. If there was, I bet James can make it monitor more. So I would like to see a dealer try to put in systems faster than James could make room on the app to watch them.
I would personally like to see them push us hard on that and put as many systems in as they can.
Put them in so fast that we have to redo the app. Chris at Johnson Supply, local guy, he's got a question saying this could be for Aaron or Mike or Bill. How does multiple frequency issues at farms, etc., affect the valve's electronics? So is he talking about electromagnetic interference, or is he talking about, do you guys know what he's asking about here?
I would guess
frequencies?
he's talking about, frequencies as far as valves talking to each other. And we really expect there not to be issues with that. We have not experienced issues with that Drop has been active and being put out for 5 years now as a system. And we chose our own proprietary network partly for that reason. It's not on a busy 2.4 gigahertz frequency, which is where all your Wi-Fi, all your Bluetooth, all that stuff is on. It's on its own 900 megahertz, and the 900 megahertz gives it more range and than the 2.4 would. And so really we don't expect to be any issues and have not experienced any issues with that.
Good. Yeah. So because the hub does connect to your Wi-Fi if you want it to, but the communication of the hub to the devices, that's the 900 megahertz frequency you're talking about. So
I'd like to jump in right there.
Yeah.
A job we recently did was for a school, and they did not want water treatment for the entire school, but for the kitchen they wanted water treatment, and then in another part of the school, water treatment. In that case, we did recommend 2 separate hubs because there was going to be a pretty good distance between the 2 water treatment systems. Plus, in a school, you can have a lot of electromagnetic interference noise. So we just wanted to play it safe and said 2 water systems, 2 hubs.
yeah, that makes sense.
That's the only job where we've had to recommend more than 1 hub.
Yeah, if you're considering it to be like in a separate system, yeah, I can see how that would be a smart choice. Next up, we got Tom from Northeastern Supply. Hey, Tom. any plans to have a commercial city softener with this technology? Tom is referring to, on the residential side, we have a carbon filter softener combo with a mid plate. So it's a filter and a softener in one tank, which I don't believe we can do currently. There just isn't a tank available to be able to do that type of thing, right?
Yeah, that technology does not exist to put a mid plate in a large diameter tank right now. We could do it on up to a 13-inch tank, but right now the technology doesn't exist to do it singularly. One of the things that we always think about, since filters and softeners play so well together, that if you can do it, especially in a commercial environment, keep them separate, because they don't require the same backwash frequencies. You know, a filter could have a long duration, and a softener has to be more precise. So with the drop systems being so flexible in how you do that, we actually prefer to use them side by side.
Yeah, I think right now the best solution up to 25 gallons a minute would be our drop cartridge filter, followed by a drop softener. If you want something backwashing, or for flows over 25 gallons per minute, I would go with a backwashing carbon filter drop, followed by the drop softener. This may have been already answered. You know, we mentioned the desktop app forthcoming soon as we get it just right. Someone's saying, will we be able to monitor all drop products by customer with the desktop application? I think you already kind of spoke to that a little bit.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Every drop product will be part of that. So that doesn't exclude anything. So we talked about the pump controller last month. We are talking about the drop kick coming. We have protection valves that can protect your home or your business with shut off. And all those things will be accessible through the Drop Web app.
So if I'm a dealer and I've got, you know, I've put systems in 800 homes throughout my metropolitan area, I could sort by customer and see, like, Mrs. Johnson has these 5 items, and then it's time for Dave to get salt because his salt sensor has said that it's low. That sort of thing. That's what we're envisioning here, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Because I realized we introduced that last question without really, I think someone had seen the previous event, so they were already familiar with our forthcoming desktop app. Some people tuning in just now might not have quite known what we were talking about. It's coming soon. Looking forward to it. Mike, question for you. Why do I need to send a raw water sample? And how do I determine my GPM?
Why do I need to have testing done before I go to my doctor for a medical procedure? I just don't understand. Now, it's kind of the same thing. We want to make sure that we're recommending the correct equipment that goes in and works from the initial installation. All of us in this industry have seen too many times where someone was kind of anxious and shot from the hip and the wrong piece of equipment is installed. And I kind of like the old saying, it's funny how you don't have time to do it right the first time, but you have time to do it over. So in a perfect world, we would like to know all the test results before we recommend equipment. If, however, you're on city water, then you really don't have to send us a water sample because we know the EPA is looking over the city's shoulders. In that case, it's probably going to be a water softener, and all we're going to need to know is the hardness. And a quick call to the city water department can give us that information.
And how do I determine my GPM flow rates, whether I'm on well water or city water? How do we know?
That's a great question. Typically, we'll go by fixture counts. So we'll ask how many toilets do you have, and are they flush valve or tank type? How many lavs, showers, toilet, or sinks? You know, you go down the list of everything that uses water. Supply that information to us. We plug that into a formula, and then by industry standards, they apply a factor because they know that not every water device is going to be on at the exact same moment. But we'll come up with a fixture count, what the theoretical maximum gallons per minute would be for that installation, and those are the numbers we go by. We know the industry standard numbers are safe. I mean, they've applied a little bit of a safety factor there. But again, we want to be safe. We do not want to be the result of low flow situations at a commercial job.
All right. And I suspect in some applications where you have a large fixture count, the pipe size even could be a limiting factor there.
Oh, absolutely.
So
and you brought up a good point. Sometimes if fixture counts aren't known, we can go by simply the size of the pipe. For example, if it's a 1-inch main, the accepted industry standard is 25, maybe 30 gallons per minute, depending how much pressure they have behind it. A 2-inch pipe could handle 100 to 120 gallons per minute. So we can sometimes use those numbers to estimate maximum possible flow rate.
Alrighty. Now we spoke earlier about if my Wi-Fi goes out, drop's going to keep working. Someone is now asking, what if my power goes out completely? What happens?
There is battery backups for all drop products, so certainly it'll go into a standby mode, and it will actually shut off its Wi-Fi radio, the hub, and will reduce the data rate between devices, and even those devices will turn off their lights, so their LEDs will just flash on periodically. So it goes, when it fully loses power, it will kind of go into that standby mode so it can conserve the battery power for as long as it can, and it'll continue to do its job. If you get a leak during that time, it'll still run the shutoff. If it'll still meter water, if water is still going through it. So yeah, it'll continue to do its job. It'll hold off on regenerations and that sort of thing. So I would suggest if somebody's in a situation where they really need, even with power off, to have their system still up and running, they maybe go into get a UPS or something more substantial to back up their system. But for most installations and most circumstances, the battery backup will take care of that situation for them.
Makes sense. Yeah, typically when our power does go out, it's not for very long.
Yeah. And oftentimes, if they're a person who has a well pump, you're not going to have water anyway to treat in that situation. So
makes sense. This may be our last question. I know last time when I announced that we were on the last question, we got a lot more questions. So this is our last question, unless more questions are texted in to 419-210-5001 while we're answering this question. So Max Feldman has asked, we're laughing because we all know and love Max and hear from him frequently. Hey, Max. If you have multiple service people responsible for a system, how many people can the information be pushed to? I'm assuming he's talking about the web app. If their system needs service, typically we envision there only being one service person per system. But do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we definitely are addressing that. And with the Drop web app, there is going to be the opportunity to log in as a service person. It can be handled different ways. Either you have one login for all your service people, or you definitely can enter separate accounts for them and they can log in that way. And there really isn't a limit again. If you have 10 service people on your team, they can all have an account, they can all log in and have access to the systems under your company, and that would take care of that need, I think, in either case, whether they want one account or multiple.
Right. So you've got maybe a large plumbing company or a water treatment dealership. They've got many service people, many trucks. They could have one. They might each have their own login, but that
which
one
on a larger operation, I think that would be the ideal way. To have each one have their own account. But on a smaller operation, it may make sense just to have a single account and not have to worry about logins and multiple logins.
That makes sense. Up to them. All right, guys, that's it for today. Anything else you guys want to add before we wrap it up today? All right. Be sure to stay tuned. Next month, we've got the Drop Kick live event coming up, so look forward to seeing you there. Thanks. Have a good day.